for Lincoln. Route 119, Homer City. Click on lutherlincoln.net.
Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank on WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Time now for our interview segment, brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Well, of course, a lot of focus in Harrisburg right now is on the state budget, as that is coming due very soon, and also a few other bills that have been passing as of late that are on their way to various parts of Congress, the Senate as well. So we have on the line with us Senator Joe Pittman. And Senator, it's good to talk to you once again here on Indiana in the Morning.
Josh, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to start off with a bill that you had commented on, I believe, last week or so, a bill that you and the Senate Republican caucus had been monitoring over these past few weeks, and that is the progress of the minimum wage increase bill. It passed by the House, albeit along party lines, on its way now over to the Senate. Have you had a chance now to take a look at that bill and form an opinion?
Well, what the House sent us, I don't think is practical and workable. To get to $15 an hour in 3 short years, I think is way too much for small employers, both for-profit and non-profit, to adapt to the market. And so I think that number is a non-starter. I think there is room to talk about minimum wage, but certainly not at the numbers that they have suggested. I think sometimes we forget that the minimum wage is not designed to be a family-sustaining wage. That was never the intent of the minimum wage. And I understand the desire to have a conversation about raising the minimum wage, but a lot of times I think we should be spending more time talking about maximum wages, which really are family-sustaining jobs, and that's where I think our focus needs to be.
So a lot of this, it sounds like the numbers are just too high at this point. Would you be in favor of maybe extending it over a longer period of time, like 5 or 7 years? Well,
I do think a lower number is achievable. I don't know what that number would be, but I don't think $15 an hour is workable. And okay. I mentioned nonprofits, and one of the things that we tend to forget is that even a small business, sure, they can pass the cost of their wages and their labor onto the products or the services that they sell. But the nonprofit community doesn't have that ability. And we have to remember that those entities have to pay minimum wage too. Right. And they will either have to reduce services or seek more funds from the community to support what they already provide. And that's a real challenge.
Obviously, this was not a surprise that it passed along party lines, so I'm assuming that this is going to head to the Senate. It sounds like from what you're saying, it could be DOA as far as the Republican caucus is concerned.
Certainly in the way it's structured right now. Do I think there's room to do something on minimum wage? As I said, yes. I think most of the members of our Senate Republican caucus think that there could be a compromise there, but not at the numbers that have been sent to us.
All right. Let's talk about budget right now. Of course, you've been one of the people that has been saying it will not matter how long it takes to get the budget done, but the budget needs to be a fair one for everybody in Pennsylvania. Let's ask about that progress. How close are we to getting a budget done, even if it isn't on time?
I think we've made some progress with the other parties involved. I think there is a possibility that we could be done by June 30th or maybe just a couple days past. There's really a deep divide, not so much between the Senate and the governor, but frankly the House Democrats. You know, the House passed a budget that spent $2 billion more than even Governor Shapiro proposed.
Right.
And so we have a situation where the governor and his own party in the House don't appear to be in sync on what we should consider as far as a spending number in the budget.
Obviously, education is a major issue, and it's one of those things that I think that you have really been forward about as far as this goes, and one that I think everybody has been able to agree with.
Well, education's, the biggest expenditure in our budget whenever you consider higher education and basic education and all of the areas that we invest. And the challenge that we have is that we have 500 school districts. all of those school districts, when it comes to public education, view what is fair differently. We have, of the 500 school districts, we have 140 school districts that have growing enrollment, and all of the rest of the school districts have declining enrollment. And so that creates a real challenge, regardless of the amount of money that we invest in education. As much of the challenge is how do we figure out how to get those dollars to the districts. And we have to recognize that there are so many other forms of education available, and that parents at the end of the day do deserve an opportunity to decide what's best for their children. You know, parents have the ultimate responsibility for their child's education. Also means parents need to take responsibility for their child's education.
It's pretty big, but one of and you mentioned the equitableness of making sure that all the districts are funded equally. That, of course, has been the hot topic, especially around Homer Center School District, who they've been saying they've not had the good end of the stick for many years as far as funding from the government. And obviously, I think they've reached out to you in the past, along with Jim Struzzi of the State House, to talk about this.
I've talked with Homer Center extensively, and they have many valid points on why they view their district being treated unfairly compared to their neighbors. I will say the last couple years, if you look at the rate of increases that Homer Center has received compared to the other districts in Indiana County, they have been significantly higher. Mm-hmm. And so the formula that was put into place about 6-7 years ago has shown a net benefit to Homer Center compared to the immediate districts surrounding it. But there again, you know, it lies part of the problem. You can look at how education support is provided in so many different ways, and one of the most basic ways is per student funding. Mm-hmm. You know, how much does each district receive per student? And as enrollments decline, that per student number goes up. And some districts have declined in enrollment more quickly than others, and that adds to that per-student investment disparity.
Going back to the budget on a grander scale, what are some of the other things that the Senate and the House really do need to kind of come together towards? What are some of the other big issues that you see that are kind of at odds right now for both sides?
The biggest overall issue is our point of view of where we are financially. It is very true that we have a fund balance right now. We have a rainy day fund, but those are one-time dollars. And a lot of the demands that are being put on us for more spending are recurring expenditures. Mm-hmm. You know, the education field is a good example. Once we increase education this year, the expectation automatically becomes that more will be added next year. And so those are recurring commitments that end up in our budget. I candidly think that we need to take an entirely different view of budgeting in terms of just assuming current revenues or expenditures are continued, but that's a conversation that needs a governor and a House to view that the same way. And so we're trying to be very careful to look at not just the next 12 months of the budget, but the next several years, because unlike our friends in the federal government, we can't borrow money mm-hmm. and deficit spend.
Right.
And that's a key difference with what we have to deal with at the state level.
Mm-hmm. And kicking it down the road either is not an option.
It's not. And you know, the governor's budget and certainly the House's budget both are spending more than we're bringing in revenue. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to eat into that fund balance. And that can be sustained for a few years, but I don't want to be here 3 or 4 years from now, all of a sudden having to look at how to pick the taxpayer's pocket more than it's already being picked.
All right. Well, one other note that I did want to touch on, it's now been a few months since Governor Shapiro has been in office, and you as the majority leader of the Senate, you've probably had to work with him on several occasions. What has it been like working with the new governor?
I found that Governor Shapiro to be very engaged. I find him to be pragmatic. I think he is working extremely hard in his position, and you have to respect that regardless of party affiliation. Mm-hmm. We certainly have deep policy differences, deep disagreements on the direction of the Commonwealth in certain policies. But I think we both understand that when we have those disagreements, sometimes it's best to set those issues aside and figure out what we can do to move the Commonwealth forward. And that's the bottom line of what we both agree on, which is we need to improve the economy of this entire Commonwealth, and particularly Western Pennsylvania. And so that's where I'm encouraged in the working relationship that we have so far.
All right. One thing I think you're going to be paying attention to today, of course, the State House Republican Policy Committee holding a hearing right here in the county concerning the energy policy here in Indiana County. And Reggie is obviously going to come up as a topic of discussion, you being a very big opponent against Reggie, like your counterpart, Jim Struzzi. So I imagine you're going to be paying attention today to what's going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate Representative Struzzi coordinating that on the House side of the equation. I think it's very important to keep highlighting what we need to do for energy policy in the state. Obviously, I still think Reggie is very detrimental to our future economy, not only in this region, but the entire state. And the sooner that we put that issue to rest, I think the better off we'll all be. You know, obviously the Homer City power plant closure is pretty devastating for all of us. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that the families affected have opportunities for different employment, retraining, and anything that they may need. But I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that in the long run, we're going to find that that site, that piece of property, is going to have an opportunity for new investment and new jobs. That's my hope, and hopefully over the next several months, something positive there can unfold.
Real quick, Senator, anything else you wanted to touch on?
I just appreciate the opportunity to talk to the listenership today. I'm eager to get back to more district-focused work here this summer. I have a lot of areas in the district that I need to get to yet, particularly with the new boundaries, and looking forward to being on the ground running here as soon as we get done with the budgetary obligations.
Well, keep us posted, Senator. Thank you very much for joining us again on Indiana in the Morning. Hope to talk to you soon.
Josh, thanks. We'll see you.
Senator Joe Pittman joining us this morning on Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. Our interview presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people.